Okay, we'll probably start then since it's 3 o'clock. So hello in Japan, you can see me? Yes?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this feels very strange to be, I can't present because it's only me here. But I haven't met all of you. So obviously Lailani I know already, so she's a friend and a very valued co-author. And to the other colleagues from Japan, very nice to meet you, albeit not in face-to-face, but it's nice to at least see you in movement. So I'm sorry that you couldn't come from Japan to Spain, but hopefully we'll meet and at a later conference. So just for formalities, just to remind ourselves, just in case we've forgotten, so our panel is called Towards Inclusion and Inclusive Leadership, New Insights from Asian Business Management Practice and Research. So it's again, so my name is David, and I'm from the USN School of Business, University of Southeastern Norway. And all of our colleagues from Japan are from the Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, either from the College of International Management or the Center for Inclusive Leadership. So I'm very happy to have you here attending. I look forward to your presentations. And since I'm the only attendees in the room, I might have to be the one asking all the questions, maybe. So I have to pay attention this time, I guess.
And you will also help us answer your questions, right?
Yes, so you can also ask questions. So I think our plan is that each of you are going to present for around 10 minutes. And then we can open the floor for this discussion. I can ask some questions, you can ask questions to each other and so forth. And then we'll see what happens. And if there are no other people coming in, then we might have a social chat maybe afterwards to see maybe how we can take this collaboration further on this topic between my institution and APU. Okay, so our speakers are then Payare, Yoshiki, Lalani, and Rebecca. So if you're okay with that, we probably start in that order. So Payare, do you want to start with your 10 minutes?
Yes, please. Okay, let me try to share the screen, and please kindly let me know you can see the share screen or not. Is everything okay?
That looks good.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so over here. All right, so good afternoon over there. Good afternoon, everyone, and actually good evening from Japan. My name is Pajari, and today I am very honored to present part of the findings on the young inclusive leadership in Thailand, the proposed trait taxonomy on behalf of my research team. So in our research team, we got 4 researchers together, and all of us are from Thailand, but then we work in a different part of the world. So with that, first of all, this presentation is actually part of exploring the determinants of the young inclusive leadership, the research taxonomy and theoretical framework, which is funded by Center for Inclusive Leadership, the Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University. So our research team are very thankful for this research grant. Now, without further ado, allow me to giving our team a little bit about the background of this study, especially this is the first presentations for our panel for inclusive leadership and diversity. So as there is an emerging trend recently regarding the type of the leaders that highly value individual differences with respect, equality, and sense of belongingness. And this is well known as inclusive leadership. How the inclusive leader or inclusive leadership actually differed from the other type of the leadership then? That was the first question that me and then my research team has been asking ourselves throughout the whole research process. So what we found based on the literatures is that first, inclusive leaders identify the potential from individual difference of their subordinates that contribute to the success of an organization. While the other types of the leadership, such as, let's say, transformational leaderships may oriented toward the organizational goals and motivate the others to adapt themselves in order to achieve those goals. In addition, inclusive leadership also helps strengthen the relationship among the people in an organization who may have different perspective and interest. What we also found is that inclusive leaders are also found to improve both employees' well-being and innovations, which can improve the competitive advantages of the organization. So all of these are part of our literatures that has been done. Now, the question is, here's come the problem statement. Although inclusive leadership has been discussed in previous study and as mostly a proportion of relational leadership theory, the concept itself is still unclear and scattered due to the limited understanding and generalizabilities. So moreover, the current literatures that our team has been able to review also shows that there are lacks of the study that investigate into inclusive leadership based upon the generational differences. So we have spent months in conducting the literature review, but when it's come to the younger generation, especially the younger generation leaders, most of the time they have been referred as autonomous, creative or entrepreneurial type of the leaders, whose leadership style might differ from those of the older generation. And the differences in generation also found to have some kind of influences on behavior and attitude differently in leading and managing the people inside of the organization. In addition, previous study on the inclusive leadership has been mainly investigated mostly within the United States and then the European context, such as race discrimination, gender equality, power distance, and then the status differences. Therefore, the emerging context and dynamics such as the Southeast Asia have not been fully considered by the scholar. And by doing this research, the questions of young leader in the context of the Asian inclusive leadership has been raised and investigated for the very first time. Now, there are two research questions that we has been covered in this particular research. First is in order to explore the determine the spatial traits, characteristic, skills, and behavior of the young Thai inclusive leaders who have influential roles in different sectors. And based on the finding, we hoped to be able to identify the theoretical framework for the young inclusive leadership that may influence the organizational performance. Now, a little bit of the literature review, inclusive leadership. I'm pretty sure that the other panelists today, they're going to explain more based on their review of the literature. So there are various definitions of inclusive leadership by different researchers. However, it is collectively evidence that the inclusive leadership mostly emphasizes on the value of the individual differences through respect and equality. According to the Hollander, back there in 2008, Hollanders mentions that respect to each other, recognitions of input, responsiveness to them, and responsibilities of both parties are the key success element for both inclusive leaders and the followers. In addition, Kuzes and Posner in 2003 has developed the LPI, or the Leadership Practice Inventory Framework, by suggesting the 5 common characteristics of the inclusive leadership. These include model the way, inspire shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. Berg in 2016 also found inclusive leaders to have this common following 6 traits: cognizance, curiosity, cultural intelligence, collaborations, commitment, and courage. With that, how about the leadership in Thailand then? Well, there are many researchers that found communication orientation, strategic thinking, planning, relationship building, and conflict management were the wider traits that influenced the leadership style, especially in a Thai context. In addition, Lunglet Kliengrai and Akaninan in 1987 also found that the Thai leaders they are more of the result-oriented type of the leadership that describe them as incorporating the relationship and task-oriented stream into the core value of their leadership style. A lot of the researcher also mentions that when analyzed from a cultural perspective, the leadership style in Thailand was found to reflect a good mix of the Buddhist belief of the middle path and the harmony. However, the Thai leadership is not really concentrated only on the Buddhist doctrine and the Thai way of life, but in turn, influence the unique characteristic of the Thai leader who demonstrate particular traits, characteristic, attitudes, behavior that share partial commonalities with inclusive leadership theory. Last but not least, how about the young inclusive leaders? The younger generation leader also found to be more self-direct, creative, and entrepreneurial, and therefore preferred by the followers when the change is needed. Moreover, the younger generation leader also have been reported to be more explorational and pro-social at the same time. So therefore, generational differences have been found to have some influences on the behavior and attitude of the leader in leading and managing the people in the organization. Now, for the research method, our research team has conducted a qualitative study by undertaking the semi-structured interview with 12 young Thai inclusive leaders who are actually under the age of the 35 years, who also have very influential roles in different sectors and then industry in Thailand. The interview questions were developed mainly based on the two previous research. One is the LPI by Guttormsen and Posner, and two, the 4R of the inclusive leadership that was proposed by Hollander back there in 2008. In terms of the data analysis, we used the qualitative deductive content analysis in order to evaluate the patterns within the content, suggest the words, and then help us to analyze the key characteristic, traits, attitude, and behavior of the young Thai inclusive leaders. Now, we would like to propose the definitions of the LPI and 4R in the young inclusive leadership, especially in the Thai context. So we developed the LPI and 4R based on the two previous research, but again, in our research, we also have further developed the definitions of each LPI and then the 4R. So please kindly note that before it was respect, recognize, and then responsibility and responsiveness as the original 4R. However, learning from the literatures, we incorporated or integrated the recognize, become part of the respect. And we also proposed result to be the new R that is going to help us to investigate or examine the traits, characteristics, attitudes, and behavior of the young Thai inclusive leaders. And with that, based on the definitions of the 5 LPI and 4R, we then develop a 5x4 matrix as shown in this table. And here is also the profile of the 12 informants who belong to a wide range of gender, age, education background, organizational type, their managerial positions also different, as well as based on their differences in their experiences, the number of years as well. As well as we also trying our best to be very inclusive and at the same time be very diversities and consider about the different field of their expertise. And here are the more than 12 different type of their expertise in the industry. So with that, here's our finding. The result of the content analysis demonstrate that the young inclusive leaders in the Thai context, and especially in this study, commonly practice the 5 LPI. This is 5 LPI, and then the 4R. Through being respected, result-oriented, at the same time responsible and responsive, role modeled, or luminaries, pioneer, motivators, as well as the nurturers. What's more, regardless of the differences or diverse of their background among the interviewees or the informants, The result also showed the commonality in their inclusive leadership characteristic and traits. And this table, we also would like to propose the young inclusive leadership traits that we found based on the interviews as well. And if you take a look at the bold highlighted keywords, is actually the same in conjunction with the previous finding that proposed by Deloitte's six signature traits of inclusive leader. These include cultural intelligence, cognizance, commitment, courage, curiosity, as well as the collaboration. Last but not least, when we asked the informants that how do they see themselves as a leader, this is how they respond. I feel that people do not rely on me, but it's me who rely on them. I cannot do things alone. It is absolutely impossible. I have to rely on them in order to run the business. I am a team leader, not a controller. Everything needs to run by them. And for me, the owner is just a title, but it's them that operating the business. How can I manage a business without people to operate? Basically, that's the important pillar of doing business. And when we ask them that, what leadership skills do they believe or think that or find the most important and then very useful for them, they often mentions about this keyword: compromise, considerate, family alike, role model, a good balance between the young and previous generation, freedom to do things, approachable, result-oriented, and effective communication. So with that, we hereby proposing the theoretical framework for the young inclusive leadership that might be able to help both the organization and then the country, or even at the country level, to identify who could potentially be the young inclusive leaders. So that's conclude our brief presentations on this particular research. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pajare. That was a very nice and succinctly communicated presentation. Kap Kunka from Madrid, Spain. So we have actually, Natalia has joined us, but I'm not sure if you have a question already, or maybe I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have a question or? Okay, thank you very much. Did you have a question or should I repeat it, Pajare?
Oh, okay, if there is no question over there, I would like to ask a question. It's okay?
Can you hear me, Pajare?
Yes, I can. Are there any questions?
But Dave, we didn't hear the question that was asked by Natalia. Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, but okay. So I repeat the question. So question from Natalia from Aalto Business School in Finland. She was wondering, in the Thai context, Pajare, if you found it to be differences in those traits for inclusive leadership when it comes to senior versus the younger ones. So it's a generational more so than maybe a Thai cultural thing.
Thank you very much for the questions. Allow me to bring back the PowerPoint slides over here again. Oops. Let me go back here. Of course, as part of the finding, since we're trying to focus on the young generation or the young inclusive leadership, right? So what we found is that for the younger generation, they are very entrepreneurial type of the mindset. They exhibit very clear, well, they are entrepreneurial mindset. They also do like pay attention at the seniority as well, like the older or previous generation. So therefore, as you can see over here, they highly exhibit or display on the respect part. And we found out that with the respect and then combinations of enable the others to act, encouraging the heart, they are the highest over here. In addition, comparing to the previous generation, the younger generations, even though they respect, they're responsible, and then they are responsiveness to the current situation, but at the same time, they are more of the result oriented. So when we're asking them, how did they see themselves, especially those who are running the family business, they said that how did they see themselves from the previous generation, from their parents' generation. They say that they are more aggressive, but aggressive in a good way, in a respectful way, so that they will be able to responsive to the current situation, but at the same time, taking the responsible to taking care of their family business. So actually, we do have more detailed information, but I know that there might be other questions coming from the floor. I hope that I answered Natalie's question somehow.
Yeah, thank you, Pajare. Was that, yeah. Anyone else want to ask a question or no? The other ones are volunteers here, so they very kindly helped us with the computer setup. So I have one additional question, Pajare, and that is, in your opinion, do you find that your findings is a specific thing for a generational issue in a Thai cultural context, or do you also think that it's more a universal generational aspect that kind of applies for, let's say, many different countries, but in terms of generations, or is it specific to Thai things?
Well, at this stage, since our samples are actually only the Thai young generations or young inclusive leaders, but we do believe that the finding can be applicable to the other young inclusive leadership as well, especially in the Southeast Asia type of the culture, where we put a lot of emphasis on seniority, but then at the same time, we have entrepreneur mindset. So I do believe that the result can be applicable to the other cultures. And I think that is the future step that we're trying to do in our research project as well. Applying the traits, characteristic that we found, and then taste it in a different culture. And then later on, we also plan to collect more data so then we can start doing the quantitative analysis to test our theoretical framework.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting. So let's open for the rest of the panel at APU. Do you have any question for Pajare and her presentation? Lailani, may I pick on you, maybe?
Because I think Rebecca. I think Rebecca wanted to ask a question earlier.
Yeah.
Rebecca.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. My apologies. Yeah, my apologies. I'm a little bit frustrated because the camera and I'm in a different place. I'm not used to this hybrid setup. Yeah. So, okay, Rebecca, Kim, please ask your question.
Yeah, this is related to Gam's just mentioning on the next direction. So Gam, you said you would like to collect the data more, qualitative data more. You want to have more interview. So what is your future plan? And then what about the next plan, quantitative analysis? Because at this moment, you are collecting you mean 10 over 10 interview data?
It's 12.
You said? 12 interview data, yes. Now you can see the picture of young inclusive leadership in Thailand. But I'm sure you have next destination. Maybe you can have much more, you mean collecting more qualitative data to see the picture of young inclusive leadership in Thailand. But this is not enough for generalization. So you want to go forward to survey. So this is your plan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Rebecca Singse. So of course, our original plan, the sample size, the samples of the interview, it was 25. But unfortunately, with the pandemic, it was very difficult to conduct the interview. We have only one time, well, since I was based in, or I'm currently in Japan, and most of my research partners, one of them is still in UK and the other two are in Thailand. So we were able to collect up to 12 interviews so far. But we do have a plan to expand it to 25 as we planned it before. And after that, based on the traits that we correct, we're trying to come up with type of the survey question with the Likert scale, where we can distribute it to more potential young inclusive leaders in the broader sense. So then with those data, we will be able to run the quantitative data analysis and seeing that how is those traits contribute to the result, contribute to the respect, contribute to to the LPI in the different part. And we hope that beyond Thailand, and with the collaborations that we have today, we might be able to collect the data in Japan. Perhaps we might want to test it even in the European market and to see how the young generation's inclusive leaders would behave similarly or differently from each other.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the panel? Lalani, are you nodding or?
I'm good for now.
You don't have a question?
No, not
Okay.
at this moment.
Yes, you're very kind today, Lalani. Good, thank you. Okay, so then I think I have a last question for Pajari, and that is, do you think that you will have found the same findings in Thailand if they were answering your question about inclusive leadership, if the context was when they were interacting with, let's say, Western people or Americans, for example? So my question is, do you think these are very fixed traits, or do you think they are more dynamic, that they might actually change their attitudes, opinions, if they were in a different multicultural context?
I do believe so, because based on our literature review so far and based on our finding, what we found is that the young inclusive leaders, the samples that we have, they are very relational type oriented, but then they are also result oriented as well. They're trying to keep both directions going together at the same time. But we actually conduct 13 interviews. However, we have to eliminate one because that interview or informant, she has a very strong background from the American culture perspective. And what we found throughout the interviews is that she's really performance-based, result-oriented. And then she said that, if I may quote her, she said that once she found one of her subordinates could not perform well, there will be a time when she called in, discuss, giving one chance. If that employee still cannot perform well, that's it. That is the final chance that she can give. So therefore, based on that result, we have to eliminate one because we found out there is a culture barriers. There is a differences in the respondents in that culture. So therefore, I do believe, or my research team also do believe that different culture will have a different influence on the way the young inclusive leader is going to make a decision or behave.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, then I think I'll make an applause from here. Thank you very much, Kapkunka, again. Then I think we'll move on to the next speaker, Yoshiki, also from APU in Japan. So they're all involved with this wonderful Center for Inclusive Leadership at APU in Beppu, Japan. So then I think I'll the next 10 or so minutes is yours, Yoshiki, if you want to share your screen.
Yes, thank you. Wait a minute. So now can you see the screen? Good. Yes, so okay, so let me start my presentation. Hello everyone, so my name is Yoshiki. So this research is about the tradition of diversity and inclusion policies and corporate behavior in Japan. So diversity and inclusion is now matter not only in the United States or Europe, but also in Japan too. And this is just a brief history about the diversity and inclusion. So many, in Japan, around 2000, many companies consider about diversity and inclusion issue because the Nikkei, it's one of the biggest economic foundation in Japan, make a working group about the diversity and inclusion and publish a report about it. And also 2004, it's another economic association, Keizai Doyukai, a Japanese association of corporate executive, also issued a report, and they said that diversity inclusion is important as a corporate strategy and as a human resource management. Also in the same year, Keidan Ren is biggest economic foundation in Japan, put the statement in the charter of corporate behavior. It mentioned that companies should respect the diversity of its employment. So it means that the member of Keidanren need to consider about the diversity in their management. In 2012 and 2015, especially the biggest changes, 2015, we Japanese Financial Service Agency and Tokyo Stock Exchange published the Japanese Corporate Governance Code, and it mentioned that it encouraged companies to hire more female top managers in the company. So in this research, the purpose is to explain how government public policies encourage corporate diversity and inclusion initiatives in Japan. As I said, from the 2000, many companies start to consider diversity and inclusion as a big issue. And also there are a lot of Japanese policies and laws which is issued after 2000. So in this research, we focus on the effect or relationship between the governmental public policies and corporate behavior. And in this presentation, because of the time constraint, we only focus on the issue related to the aging population. So in this research, we collected the data from of the company, and we applied the Toyo Case CSR database. It's the biggest CSR data in Japan, and also we checked the government white papers to identify what kind of policies government issued or published. And correct from 2006 to 2012, and we found that there are almost 18,000 farm years data. And we also identified 56 public policies, laws, and other relevant documents related to the gender issue, aging people issue, underrepresentation issue, and foreign workers issue. And in this research, we only focus on the aging people, aging society. And we have calculated the ratio data for diversity and inclusion initiative with Japanese companies intruded. So what we found about the diversity and inclusion policy is that in Japan, one of the issue about the aging population is a declining birth rate. So according to the government white paper, the estimated birth rate in 2014 is about 740,000, which is less than 90% of the level in 2019. And also about the aging population issue in Japan, over 20% of Japanese are over 65 years old. This is a current situation. And also, one third Japanese will be 65 or older, and one fifth Japanese will be over 75 by 2030. So it means that there are a lot of elderly people in Japan now. So this is a figure about the number of live births and also total fertility rate. So again, number of live births is declining for these years. It means that not many, especially there are not so many newborn kids in Japan. And also, and in the estimation, as again, 2014, the newborn babies will be only 740,000. So this implies that the Japanese company will suffer to hire new employees because there are less young employees. And we also identified some public policies, laws related to the aging populations, and we found that most of the public policies are issued before 2010. There are more laws issued before 2010, and red one is related to the child care. Okay, so you can see that there are a lot of policies related to the child care in Japan, and blue one is related to the elderly people. So there are few elderly people's act, and green one is related to the work-life balance. So it's more broad meaning. Work-life balance is also including in the child care. So, but I just want to emphasize it. So, and what companies, especially what Japanese company do to deal with aging population is that they promote work-life balance with flexible working systems. So many companies introduce a lot of new working system. And also companies start to support employees who have their children. And also because there are more elderly people, so company also supports employees for who care their parents. And also Japanese companies start to hire elderly people more than before. So I show some graphs, figures for it. So this is, for example, about the systems related to the flexible work style. So as you can see that after 2007 is the year the government published a charter for work-life balance and action policy for promoting work-life balance. So it means that governments push work-life balance to the Japanese company. And then after that, many companies introduced half-day paid leave system. So 75% of the Japanese company in 2008 introduced this system, and in the 2013 it becomes 85%, like that. So and also shorter working hours is the second popular system in Japan for support flexible work style. And so in this sense, this public policy may related to or push companies to support employees' work-life balance. However, flexible work hour system is not so popular, or it seems not related to this act. Right? And another trend is that we can also find that the percentage of these systems are decreasing these days. So it also means that the government's policy is not continue to affect in these times. And these kind of things are also other flexible work systems. So nowadays, more, for example, telecommunication system and satellite office becomes popular to support flexible work style in Japan. And sorry, because of the time, I skipped this slide. And this is also, let me skip because of the time. So I want to show the this figure because it's related to the aging people. So in 2016, the new act is published. So, and this act said that Japanese company need to hire over 60, Japanese companies need to set retirement age as 65. So, and in 2016, 60% of the companies hire or employee until age 65. So it means that almost and after this act is issued, the percentage is not so much changed. So it means that this act may not directly affect on the corporate behavior. So this is an example of the aging populations, public policies. So I want to summarize our findings. So first is that the Japanese government has focused on improving childcare and work-life balance, especially many companies introduce a lot of many different kind of systems to support childcare and work-life balance. And Japanese company also promoted work-life balance initiatives after the government established the Charter for Work-Life Balance and Action Policy for Promoting Work-Life Balance in 2007. So this year it was a turning point for companies. And also several Japanese companies have also introduced re-employee system for employees who left due to pregnancy, childcare, and other family reasons to deal with decreasing workforce in Japan. So Japanese companies try to encourage employees to stay at the company, even though they leave pregnancy, childcare, and other family reasons. And finally, Japanese companies also extend the retirement age and hiring employee until age 65 because of the revision of the Act of Stabilization of Employment of Elderly Persons. So today I just showed what happened in Japanese society related to the aging society. So in the future, I want to investigate more about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yoshiki. Arigato. That was a very nice presentation and very nice graphs and very clear to see and understand. So do we have any questions from the audience? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So now I'm reminded about my age now. I'm not getting any younger, so I have to use my memory not to remember Natalia's questions. So I should have brought a pen and paper. But first of all, she praised Yoshiki's presentation, so she thought it was very interesting. So I'm hopefully you're glad to hear that. And she had two questions, and the first was, if these diversity and inclusion policies are also directed towards foreigners, for example, in either international Japanese companies, or are they mostly for or predominantly for Japanese local nationals? And unless my memory fails me now, then the second question was, how long are the normal work days in Japan, and how short are they now after the implementation of the new D&I policies? Did I remember that correctly, Natalia? Okay, I'm not too old yet. Thank you. Any answers, Yoshiki?
Yes, especially about the first question. Thank you so much for your question. So first question is related, in first question, yes, Japanese policies are also related. These kind of things are also related to the foreign employees, and also there are some other policies features just focus on the foreign employees in Japan. But unfortunately, we also checked the public policies in Japan for foreigners, but the number of policies for foreigners are less than other policies. So it means that Japanese governments are not well managed for foreign workers, I think. And the second question is working hours in Japan, right? So it actually depends on the company. But nowadays, people or Japanese companies become strict for time management. They don't encourage employees to overwork. This is because one of the issue is suicide. We call karoshi. People die because of too much working. So then now many, especially big companies, Japanese companies, consider how much their employees work in a day like that, and it becomes so strict now.
Thank you. Yeah, was that answers to your question? Great. Yeah. So Natalia's follow-up question, Yoshiki, is so she's referring to Finland, where she lives, where they normally have 6 hours, 45 minutes workday, and want to reduce it maybe down to 6 hours approximately, maybe down to even a 4-day work week. So she was wondering how many hours is the kind of standard Japanese workday in number of specific hours? Is it 10 hours, or what does the law says about that?
Okay. 8 hours is common. 40 hours in a week is working hours. So most of the company, most of the people work 8 hours in a day. So, and 5 days working day for most Japanese people.
Okay.
Yeah, but many companies do not obey that though.
Yeah.
So my follow-up question probably, Yoshiki, would be, is that kind of on paper, but what about in actual life? Because Japan is not known for having the shortest work days.
Yeah, so of course, some worked 10 hours in a day or 12 hours in a day. Yeah, especially if Japanese if their middle managers work more.
Okay, those who want to go upwards in hierarchy, maybe. And yes, I see. Yeah, one more question, Natalia. Okay, a great question again from Natalia. So she was inquiring about your numbers or the statistics, Yoshiki, that with the implementation of diversity and inclusion policies from the Japanese government for 10, 15 years ago, but still the numbers are quite low in terms of the effect. So I think the question is more about are we not seeing the effect that we were hoping for or anticipating in Japan, or are there any particular reasons maybe why the numbers are still low, still after all these years with diversity policies?
Okay.
Yeah. Would it be even lower? Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Especially when I do the interview with Japanese companies, employees, for example, even though they have some department related to the diversity and inclusion, because the top management are not focused or enthusiastic or promote diversity and inclusion, so some companies are not think diversity and inclusion is matter for them. It's not a big issue for them like that. So that's why most of the percentage or number is still law in Japan. Of course, there are some companies who are very doing well, but most of the companies are still struggling to promote diversity and inclusion.
Okay, thank you. And maybe a last question for me, Yoshiki, is you refer to, of course, the macro trends and demographics. I'm just wondering, do you find that these are mostly forced policies from government? And then the second part of the question is, how welcoming are companies at the firm level culturally to actually accept these policies and carry them out in practice? Just wondering if there's a tension between governmental intentions and local practices.
Yes, so some policies are mandatory. It means because of the law, it requires companies to set some requirement ratio about, for example, female top managers or retirement age for elderly like that. But still there are a lot of voluntary policies. So it's necessary to push Japanese company to promote diversity and inclusion more.
If I may just add, then one example actually is like I believe Yoshiki mentioned about it. Like in Japan, there's this policy for employing like at least 2% of the workforce should consist of those people with disabilities. But in Japan, many companies are still not able to follow that policy. So instead, they then choose to pay the penalty because they're not able to meet that policy. So Yoshiki mentioned those several policies that are being initiated by the government, but the effectiveness of those policies still needs to be investigated. So I think that's the reason that's actually the motivation of this study for us, like to raise that awareness that having those policies alone will not be sufficient if governments as well do not follow up or do not follow. And we wanted to check whether those policies actually would lead to changes in behaviors of companies. Unfortunately, it's not really so evident, just like Yoshiki has presented to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lalani. Any final comments from the other panelists? No, not yet. No. Okay, thank you very much, Yoshiki. Okay, so then we have Lalani. I think it's the next. So Natalia have to leave us, but thank you for joining us. And yeah, questions. Yeah, no worries. But thank you very much for coming. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Natalia, for your questions. All right. Could you see my slides or my presentation slides? Which one you could see?
I think you have to go to presentation mode, Lalani.
All right, hold on. Let me, there you go. Looks good now?
Now it's good, yeah.
All right, okay. Well, so Dave, again, my apologies that we couldn't make it there to present this, to present and have this panel with you in Madrid. I hope you're enjoying your stay there at Madrid for the conference. So this paper that I'm going to present for this panel is actually part of the book project that we have for the center, and it's also a continuation of what Yoshiki has just presented. Well, the overall objective we had when we started this project is basically just to raise awareness. And well, first to elucidate the situations in Japan and then raise awareness, and also then call for attention on things that we could still do to improve the diversity inclusion situation in Japan. So in this presentation, Yoshiki and I then focus on industry discussion, because we wanted to also called for industry level policies and industry level discussions as well. So as Yoshiki has mentioned in his presentation, one biggest problem of Japan is its aging population. And as you could clearly see from this figure, it just keeps going down, and the population is shrinking. And thus, many companies now are the attention to diversity has increased because it's also motivated by this aging society of Japan. And here, as you can see, now the population is shrinking, and thus diversity could be, many think that diversity could be a solution to this aging problem of Japan. And this figure also then helps, also, I think would improve, would be an additional information how about diversity in Japan. So this figure represents the percentage of foreigners and Japanese by age group in Japan's population. And so as this figure shows, then the ratio of foreign residents of the young age group is higher than Japanese population. So meaning the working age for foreigners consist more of the working age population of Japan, while Japanese occupy the seniority population in Japan, while foreigner only has a very low percentage of population in Japan. So that's, I think, additional information that I think we would like to share, because we also included diversity in terms of nationality in this study. And also Yoshiki has mentioned earlier that while there are many policies related to aging society and also to gender equality in Japan, there are still a lack of policies that focus on foreign diversity. And there's another also, I think, another fact that I think would raise the need for having a true discussion on diversity and inclusion in Japan is the gender gap. So Japan is placed 121st out of 156 countries in the world in terms of gender equality. And it's the worst among G7 countries. China is 107. China is Korea. Sorry, I couldn't see my own slide. Korea is 102nd place. Thailand is 79th place, and then Philippines is 17. So I just included those countries being represented by the panel here. So, and then in Asia, well, Philippines is actually the highest ranked country in Asia. So I think this fact itself, again, increased the importance of having more discourse or discussion on D&I in Japan. And so, as I mentioned earlier, our motivation for this study is there's an increased attention to diversity in Japan, but there are still a lot of problems, issues that need to be addressed. And one of the problems is that is actually highlighted by many, mentioning that recruiting, retaining, and empowering a diverse workforce in Japanese companies is problematic, as also illustrated by Yoshiki. And there are several policies that are introduced in Japan, but their effectiveness and how are they being reflected on industry trends are yet unknown. And there's a lack of understanding of D&I orientation across industries in Japan. And we all know from the literature, like in the strategic management literature and organizational studies, like industry factors actually play a very important role in driving corporate changes or corporate behavioral changes. So Yoshike and I use the same data source. So we use the Toyo Keizai CSR data from 2006 to 2010. This is the most comprehensive CSR database in Japan. And we categorize the industries according to the global industry classification standards that are developed by S&P Dow Jones. And so here we define diversity at least in 4 dimensions. So we use age, sex, disability, and nationality to measure diversity across industries. And then another measure of D&I orientation would be women leadership. And we use 2 indicators, such as average percentage of women in management position and average percentage of women on boards in each industry. Another measure of D&I orientation that we have here is D&I support and policies indicators. So these indicators then would refer to whether the first one would refer to whether a department that focuses on advancing D&I exists in a company, and the second one is whether there is a department that focuses on women empowerment and also existence of policies for LGBT, and also existence of reemployment system for employees who left the company due to pregnancy, childbirth, childcare, nursing care, or transfer, and also policies that allow employees to work until the age of 65. And so this table summarizes the finding that we have. So we have these different indicators of D&I orientation on the left side. So what we did in this table is we did a ANOVA analysis to see whether this D&I orientation differs across industries. And this table shows that there's indeed a significant difference across industries, as the p-value for all D&I orientation or D&I practices are significant at 1% level. And also if we look at the time p-value, all time p-values are significant at 1% level for all D&I practices except the one for foreign employment. So this means that although it's minimal, it's marginal, there's an increasing trend over years for other D&I practices except for foreign employment. Foreign employment in companies across industries in Japan has remained low, and it even doesn't show an increasing trend over the years. And so this figure then shows about diverse workforce employment across industries. So I'm just going to focus on those industries that I highlighted here. So the financial industry has actually shown a strong, like a high diversity in terms of, and this is a combination of age, gender diversity on the left side, and also foreign and disability employment on the right side. And as you could see here, the insurance and the financial industry or financial sector has shown the strong trend for this 4 measures of diversity, while energy, materials, capital goods sector has shown a rather low diversity in terms of workforce. And this figure also then So this figure also shows that the financial sector has a strong emphasis on providing diverse workforce empowerment and policies. Excuse me, I hope I will get through the presentation. And here in the slides, it shows the trend for women leadership and empowerment. So again, here, the financial sector actually has shown a strong trend in terms of women leadership and empowerment over the years, while interestingly, consumer services and retailing industry are actually high in terms of placing or having women in management and also on boards, but their policy for women empowerment is actually low. So which is I think there's this inconsistency in terms of their policies, that they don't empower women to go up, but they are able to actually they have women in their top management. So these are just some of the findings that we have after we analyze the data across industries. And just to sum up in the interest of time, so there's a significant difference in terms of D&I orientation across industries. And as I mentioned earlier, the financial sector has actually shown strong emphasis on D&I, while some industries, including consumer service industry, telecommunication service industry, have shown some concerns and problems in terms of how they are progressing with their D&I orientation. So some implications that we offer in this study. So we found that progress was rather marginal in some industries, and this calls for an institutional strategy and policy at the sectoral and industrial level. Most of those policies, all those policies actually that Yoshiki presented to us earlier, actually at the national level. None of them actually focuses on any industry in Japan. And also, as I mentioned earlier, industries in the financial sector exhibited a strong D&I orientation, while energy and industrial sectors had a weak D&I orientation. And this could actually then be explained that this difference could be attributed to institutional conditions and normative pressures conducive to the promotion of D&I. The financial sector actually has a strong pressure to be more transparent and also to be more committed to D&I, because they are continuously subject to scrutiny by the public, because they continuously receive pressures from their stakeholders, and we know that U.S. actually is that several big major financial companies are headquartered actually in the United States. And U.S. actually has strong D&I policy for companies in the financial sector, and that could actually have driven also the strong trend in Japan. And so we would like to emphasize that industries could serve as an institutional context and generate pressures to influence corporate behaviors and strategies. And so also, to simply put, as we found in our study, that that there are weak, that the Japanese government has weak policies towards some dimensions of D&I, including foreign employment and also disability employment. So we could say that weak D&I public policy could result in weak D&I orientation across industries. And so then it's better for us to have regulatory frameworks and pressures that would encourage companies to promote D&I further. For example, in Australia, they are promoting diversity and inclusion in STEM industries, And so there are policies that are being introduced by governments in other countries that target specific industries, and Japan could start thinking about those policies as well. So that's the end of our presentation about industry level D&I in Japan. So if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Lani. I'll give you applause. It's just me here now, but we have you. So I forgot to Google thank you in Tagalog, so I'll stick to English. My apologies. But my first question, Lani, is: do you find any, or did you find any correlation between those several numbers you had? So, for example, you had more women on board, and there were more women empowerment, but you also had a graph there with foreign employees, for example, or diverse. So I'm just wondering if you found any correlation between those type of things.
In some industries, it seems that there is, like, for example, for the financial sector, Yeah, the financial sector is strong in most of the dimensions. So their diverse employment practices, their diverse empowerment practices are higher compared to other industries. But there are also some industries that actually there are inconsistencies. For example, the consumer industry. The consumer industry is high in terms of women representation in management and on boards, while they have weak internal D&I policy. So I don't want to jump into conclusion, but one interpretation I could act that I hope I'm wrong is that it could be because of just present consumer industry is I think it's also subject for public scrutiny, and so consumers are very much sensitive to what they do. So and we could easily actually see, we could easily observe D&I at the top level because companies open, they're more transparent in providing that information, but not about internal policy. So it could be because they would like to create that image of being diverse and inclusive, but whether they are actually doing it internally is a question. I started to question by looking at the data because of the inconsistency in those policies that the industry has. And again, that's just, I think we still need to look for further evidence whether that interpretation is true. But we all know that many companies are actually scrutinized, and many are skeptical about CSR or D&I by companies because they say that it could be just because they want to put up like a good image that those companies are actually doing D&I, but to what extent they are true to that is a question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other panelists who have any questions for Leilani? No? Yeah. Then I guess because Natalia has left us, so I have to do my best to try to pose another intelligent question, but I'll do my best. I'm not always successful with that. But so one final question from me, Leilani, and that is, obviously from a normative perspective, it seems Japanese government wants to see more diversity and inclusion in its workforce. So from a, let's say, a structural agency type of perspective, do you find that the structural, i.e. the government's eagerness to succeed with this, is that weaker in power compared to the potential resistance within firms against actually implementing diversity policies?
I guess I think both parties are responsible, like both the government and companies, because when we do, as Yoshiki actually has mentioned earlier, that still several top management teams or executives, leaders are still not so much committed to D&I. And we could also, like as Yoshiki also presented earlier, like the government policies are really not so effective in changing the behavior of Japanese companies. So I don't know who is more responsible, but I think both sides are responsible. Many Japanese companies still think that D&I is an option for them, like that it really doesn't affect them much. So I think that's the mission we have. So we would like to increase more awareness that D&I is actually not an option. There's also there's a business case for D&I, and at the same time, I think it's also a moral imperative for Japanese companies to promote more D&I in their companies. And of course, then which dimension of D&I company would focus would also differ across companies and across industries. I hope that answers your question, David.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And I'm sure we will be discussing that more in detail soon. So thank you very much. So some applause again. So we are actually nearing 1:15. I think we have to move on to Rebecca Kim. And then your 10, 12 minutes, the floor is yours, Rebecca.
Okay, David. So we have to finish 4:30 p.m. over there, right?
Yes.
So I will have about 10 minutes presentation, right?
Yes, let's try for that. Yes.
Okay, so if I exceed the time, please warn me. Okay. All right. So let me share my slide. So can you see? Okay. All right. So this is the ongoing project in relation to inclusive leadership under the title of Reshaping Business Leadership by employing UN SDGs, case study of Korean Big Five conglomerates. So study aim and background is today we are in the age of big business. However, inclusive leadership of big firms does not meet the inquiry of global business. So that's why I would like to see if how big business they can improve their inclusive leadership, presumably UN SDGs. So I would like to seek how and to what extent the chaebol, especially Korean chaebols, big conglomerates, use the SDGs to foster their inclusive and responsible leadership, and what are the challenges for this direction. So these are chaebols. Just let's imagine Mr. Kim. I'm Mr. Kim. So I wake up in the morning, read the Samsung Galaxy phone, and they go to toilet by using as toilet paper, shampoo, read GS, and they go to my office, read the Hyundai Mobile, and they during the lunchtime, have lunch in CJ restaurant, and then after that, go to Hanwha Hotel to meet my counterpart and then chewing gum like this in the evening. So I have a business trip to Madrid, such as, and I went to Incheon International Airport and they buy some, cosmetic for my wife in Sheila Duty Shop, and they'll have a roaming with SK Telecom and fly with Korean Airline. This is Mr. Kim's just one day life. These are all chaebols. These are all chaebols. So 5 big chaebols in Korea: Samsung, SK, Hyundai, LG, Lotte. They have half of Korean stock market. So in terms of chaebol, so as you may guess, is a little bit different with the Japanese Jaibetsu, but we can call it similar, and the large Korean conglomerates that is run and controlled by an owner or a family. They are the center of wealth in South Korea. So some people say that's why Korea, they have guided capitalism or personal and management capitalism. So of course, chaebol can be the leader of national competitiveness. Good things, however, always in crisis. What kind of crisis? It creates some kind of a Korean government, definitely Korean INC, the state bank chaebols nexus. The assessment on chaebols versus owner of chaebols is different. So nowadays, there are big critics, especially on the 3rd generation of chaebols. So research on chaebols, not based on scientific analysis, I have to make a confession, but mainly subjective position, the scholars' inclinations. So it could attract the interest and but very descriptive. So lack of historical view, but focus analysis on the certain phenomena such as corporate governance, labor issues, but not the holistic approach. Before IMF crisis versus after IMF crisis, the jabber after IMF crisis, there are series of research on Jabber's bankruptcy. If then, why Jabber should build the inclusive leadership? This is my fundamental question. Little objection on Jabber's leadership to Korea's economic development or Korea's national competitiveness. However, questions are, Jabber's can cumbersome challenge to show their progressing leadership which meet the anticipation and need of global society. There is definitely issue of inclusive leadership of business in times of inclusive capitalism. In terms of inclusive leadership literature, as you mentioned already, and then time is against us, just I will pass. So if then let me pass why inclusive leadership is needed to Samsung, Hyundai, and the other Korean jabbers, because there are new rules of games in national global market, double standard. So credibility matters, and the ethical leadership, and the little try to check jabbers' impact to society. So if then how jabbers can build inclusive leadership, I suggest UN Sustainable Development Goals. Also, I will pass this one because this is not, you mean that the main themes. Currently, corporations are struggling under the pressure of the global society to contribute to sustainable development of the world. Why business should be engaged in that? They said the SDGs are also a matter of money, and the private sector business can play an important role in advancing the global development agenda. So the SDGs are good for business, and business has massive opportunity for helping to achieve SDGs. So by now, what I did, analysis of a sustainability report, annual report or integrated report, ESG report of 5 jabbers. It means Samsung, Hyundai, SK, LG, and Lotte. So as UN SDGs has announced 2015. So I tried to investigate from 2016 to by now. So these are overall picture. So SDGs followed by jabbers year-wise. So as you may observe like this. So by 2016, jabbers, they tried to integrate SDGs into their sustainability report, except Hyundai and Lotte. However, from 2017, all of them, they tried to integrate, but not all 17 goals. So I would like to see what's the difference among 5 jabbers. So each jabber, my second question to you is each jabber, how many for each goals? And which is the first, second, and the third goals of SDGs? So as you may observe, wait a moment, please. First, the Samsung, they try to cover 14 goals, and then also Hyundai, 15 goals, 10, 10, 11. But if then among these, what are 3s? So number 1 is no poverty, Samsung. And then in terms of Hyundai, good sustainable development goal 3, good health and well-being. And then SK, number 3, and then Lotte, no poverty. So they are a little bit different. So if then I would like to see by year from 2016 and then 2021 by year, how many for each year, as you may observe, and which is the first goal for each year. So from 2016 to 2020, no poverty. But as we can guess the reason from 2021, it has been changed, good health and well-being. I presume.
Rebecca, sorry to interrupt you. Would you be able to wrap it up within a minute or so? Or?
I will do.
Thank you.
I will do. Okay, so 2021, good health and then well-being because of COVID. So this is my last kind of analysis on UN SDGs. So SDGs followed by GBERS, as you may guess, goal 8. All they are talking about except Hyundai, group 4, goal 4, SK, LG, Lotte, and then group goal 16 and 9, Samsung, LG, and SK, Lotte. So this is my final suggestion. So GBERS, they are struggling with these two divergent pressure, developing economy and developing society. So they have issues of sustainability, credibility, and the ethical leadership. So how they can tackle? They can use SDGs, 17 goals, by introducing inclusive leadership for sustainable development. It may help to build inclusive leadership of business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. 감사합니다. And let's open for any question from the panel first. Any comments or observations? Dave,
may I?
Please, Ilanani.
Yes. Yeah, Rebecca, thank you very much for that interesting presentation. So I wonder whether, so what I remember is that, so there's this change in terms of SDG focus among all tribals over the years. Like they first focus on no poverty, and now as we would expect about well-being and well-being, health and well-being. Were you able to observe like differences across tribals though? And if yes and no, why do you think is that?
So actually, yeah, that's a very good question. That's what I really would like to see. I would like to get into more data. By now, I overall searched what they are talking about, but I couldn't see why. So, and then what is the biggest kind of challenge for them? That's what I would like to see as a next, kind of destination. Like again, I would like to have an interview with them, especially SDGs personnel in Korea, but because of COVID, I couldn't be there. So what are the challenges and how they can be focused, and but big challenges by integrating UN SDGs into their business strategy. That's what I understand. So if then how they can cope with this kind of challenges, I think this kind of things with only observing the data, this kind of secondary data is not possible. That's why for the next destination, I would like to have a qualitative, in-depth qualitative interview.
Right, thank you. And I have a final question for me, and I really liked your very specific analysis, Rebecca, because you could clearly see what kind of direct engagement that the tribal are addressing. So it doesn't become a very abstract analysis. That was very nice to see. So my question is, if I understand tribal correctly, they are already based on partnerships, and number 17 of the SDG is all about partnership between business and other institutions in the ecosystem. Just wondering, do you think because tribal has that partnership history, do you think that tribal will be more readily able and more equipped to actually engage in partnership and in order to achieve the SDGs?
I think so, and then I hope so. Because as I mentioned just before, there are two, different pressures. This is quite related with Lani's the day before yesterday's presentation, informal and the formal institutional pressure. So formal pressures, there is the regulation. Although this is a voluntary but almost mandatory UN SDGs, so they have to. But in terms of a voluntary, it's really difficult for them to engage in by having their money matter or shareholder return business strategy. That's their dilemma. So if then what is the best thing or most important thing to get into cope with this kind of informal institutional pressure? I think this is the CEO's philosophy because it's also related with the money. So if there is no leaders, inclusive leaders philosophy to get into this one, if then it will be tough. But I hope, and I think anyway, they will look forward to be engaged in more actively into UN SDGs. And we should foster their engagement into that by our research. That's what I think.
And just a brief follow-up, Rebecca. I noticed in your analysis that most of the tribal are addressing the same SDGs, and there might be a very natural reason for that. So another question is, in order to meet the needs of society, which the SDGs are supposed to give a role to MNEs, an active role in achieving the SDGs, do you find that there are some of the SDGs that are maybe neglected too much of the tribal in order to actually have even more positive influence on wider society that maybe are neglected at the moment?
At this moment, I think it really depends. For example, we never ever expect this kind of COVID crisis, such as because of this kind of, institutional dynamics due to some kind of, incident or the others, it will be changed. Their focus on, certain SDG goal will be changed. However, I think there, because they cannot cover the all 17 goals with the same, kind of, volume or money investment or same balance. However, I think they will focus some. It means the others may be neglected a little bit, but there should be the focus. For example, Samsung, they focus much more, well-being, the other much more focused on, in terms of, Hyundai, they are much more focused on economic development. It will be divergent, but Korean overall, it looks quite similar. That's what I think.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. We have now reached 4:35 actually, so I'm afraid I have to draw the session to a close. So it was a pity that we weren't able to meet in person in Madrid, but of course there were very understandable reasons why you couldn't travel from Japan. So I'm quite sure, and hopefully we will be able to meet in person somewhere in Japan or somewhere else. The European Academy of Management Conference is in Switzerland, so, and the next EBA is in Oslo, my hometown. So hopefully you might be considering one of those conferences. So Yoshik, Parajay, and Lalani, and Rebecca, thank you very much for attending and presenting very interesting research. I learned a lot, and my apologies for being a little bit all over the place, but I'm quite new to this hybrid thing with microphones and cameras and screens in all different directions in a very big lecture hall. You might not have seen it, but I'll send you a photo later on. So, but Natalia, who attended earlier, she thought it was very interesting, and that was testified by her number of questions. Okay, so then I'll just say thank you very much, and then I'll see you online. Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, David. Have a good day over there.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Good night. Bye.